was diagnosed on my 30th birthday, which was June the 13th. An overdosage of bone marrow meds, which made me extremely sick. 7 days of excruciating pain, and then I finally went to the ER. 6 surgeries, 8 rounds of chemo. Wanted to give up. 4 more rounds of chemo. 6 weeks of radiation. I rang the bell. And then I had a botched reconstructive surgery. 5 years of chemotherapy medication and a partial hysterectomy. I'm Larisha Williams. You want to hear my story of survival? Come along with me. I was diagnosed with breast cancer actually when I was 29, and I go with 30 because that was the day of my birthday when I actually got the call that I needed to come to the doctor's office and I had been diagnosed with breast cancer. I went to the doctor because I had very heavy menstrual cycles. And at that time, after having those menstrual cycles, my doctor actually felt a lump in my left breast and referred me to go get a biopsy done. 3 days later, after that, my husband actually got laid off and we lost our insurance. And I waited an entire year before I ever went to the doctor because I didn't think anything of breast cancer because I had never heard of anybody in my family having breast cancer, and it just wasn't a big deal at that time for me because I was just thinking that it was actually nothing. But that lump had actually been there since I was in high school. And I always felt it at the bottom part of my left breast, but I never thought anything of it. You hear things like scar tissue and tissue in your body and stuff like that, not thinking, not telling anybody at that time. And I just had went through life. And to my knowledge, I don't think that it ever got bigger. So after I went to the doctor at 29, I waited the entire year. I finally went to the doctor to go get everything checked out. And that's when my doctor called me on my 30th birthday and said, "Happy birthday, but you need to be in my doctor's office on Monday morning." And I said, "For what?" And she said, "Well, the lump on your results came back cancerous." So at that time, I was really young and naive. So I actually hung up the phone and didn't think anything of it. And I sat there for a minute before I even called my husband or anybody. And I said, I called the doctor's office back and I said, "Does that mean that I have breast cancer?" And she said yes. So it still didn't hit me because at that time, being so young, I thought that I was just going to go to the doctor, I was going to have surgery, and that was going to be it. Little did I know that I was getting ready to head down a roller coaster of multiple surgeries and treatments and things like that. So after I went to the doctor and my husband came along with me, um, the doctor gave me two plans. You can go with the lumpectomy or you can go with a mastectomy. But because my test results came back negative and it wasn't genetics, I decided to go with the lumpectomy because I didn't feel the need to have both breasts removed. And at that time, I was married, but I was still young. So the body image and things like that, I didn't think that I was going to be really comfortable with. So after I had surgery, that's when everything just kind of just went downhill from there. During surgery, I had the lumpectomy. I had lymph nodes removed, and after having those lymph nodes removed, they saw that I needed to go into chemotherapy because the tumor had broken up into pieces when they were going in to remove it. So they didn't know where throughout the body that the tumor had traveled to. And so that's why they decided that I needed to do a couple of rounds of chemo. So I thought it was just going to be 4 rounds of chemo and that was definitely going to be it. But it turned out not to be it. So after having surgery, my doctor made me aware that the tumor had broken up into pieces and it had traveled throughout the body. So she referred me to an oncologist where I was supposed to get my treatment, my chemotherapy treatments. And during that time, my doctor was trying to figure out how he was going to treat me because I was actually the youngest patient that he had saw. And the reason why is because I didn't go to the MD Anderson or the big name hospitals because the insurance actually did not want to cover me because I was only 30 years old. So all my doctors were smaller facility doctors, but they knew what they were doing because I can say now that I had a very compassionate team of doctors. But in the process, my doctor did not know how to treat me. So he gave me a dosage of bone marrow meds. And those bone marrow meds were designed to actually expand and open up the bones so that treatment can go smoothly. So after he gave me the medicine, I was supposed to go home and I was supposed to do the injection in my stomach. And that was supposed to start working over the next week. So I can do the following week. I could go to, I can start my chemotherapy treatments. But that was a total disaster because he gave me medicine that was more for an elder who had a slower metabolism, whose body had kind of aged through time. And because my body was young and active, the medicine overworked in my body. So it was supposed to kind of like stay at like a flowing flat line and it was supposed to work slowly. But what happened is because I was younger, it shot straight up and it caused the medicine to overwork in my body, which caused me a lot of pain. So I started vomiting really bad. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. It actually caused me to be very sensitive to sunlight. My husband did, at that time, he did everything he could. He would get warm towels to try to like lay over my body so I could withstand the pain. But there's nothing you can do when bone meds are working in the body. There's nothing you can do but allow it to pass over. So every single bone in my body has started to expand and open slowly. I mean, bones that you don't even think that you have, the bones in my face, everywhere. It was hard for me to open my eyes. It was hard for me to chew because all of these bones were just expanding slowly and they were bothering me. And I kept vomiting. I couldn't keep anything down. It was just the worst. So after 7 days of doing that, I decided, okay, I'm going to the ER. And the reason why I couldn't call my doctor because my doctor actually had went out of town on vacation. And I called back and spoke with the nurses, but they didn't know what to. And I was at a doctor's office who was so used to treating elders, people that were over 60 that was fighting breast cancer or having to even go through chemotherapy treatment. I was actually only supposed to do 4 treatments and then I would be complete. But after some time, they decided that I needed to do more chemotherapy. So I went to the doctor's office to have my chemotherapy treatments, and they did not recommend for me to get the port because I was only supposed to do 4 rounds of chemo. So they went through my left arm and they decided to mix 2 different types of chemo therapy medication so they could treat me because again they were kind of practicing medicine and they didn't really know what was going on. And so at some point I did start feeling like an experimental project because that doctor's office particularly had never treated somebody that was 30 years old. So I sat and I'm looking around. I don't see anybody that looks like me. I don't see anybody my age, anybody younger. So I'm just sitting there, and my mom is sitting there. My husband had to go get the boys from school. And so I'm sitting there, and I start getting like a shortness of breath. So I didn't know because I was always nervous about hearing chemotherapy growing up, how people would get sick. So I actually thought that that's how I was supposed to feel. So I'm sitting there and like it's like my breath was getting cut short and I felt like I couldn't breathe. And so after I'm looking around and I said, am I supposed to feel like this? And the nurse said, what do you mean? I said, it feels like my breath is getting cut short and I can't breathe. So she came over, she checked my vital signs, she started panicking, she started unhooking everything because my veins in my arm had started to collapse and my organs had started to shut down. At that time, I didn't know that my organs had started to shut down because after they unhooked everything, they sent me immediately over to the hospital, which was right next door, connected to the doctor's office. And so they told me that I had to immediately stop doing chemotherapy treatments, and they were scheduling me to go and get my port inserted so they can then go through the chemotherapy treatments through the port. And I had my port put in on the right side, and I had to take Benadryl before every chemotherapy treatment, because the chemo that they had me on was giving my body an allergic reaction, which was causing organ failure as well. And so they had to switch the type of chemo that I was on. So they put me on two different types of chemo, and they mixed those two chemo treatments together.